But you look at a team that has definitely improved their shot creation abilities on that team. Houston Rockets have done a great job in that. They're a little bit farther along than the Magic. They made some free agency splashes last summer, bringing in Dillon Brooks, bringing in Van Vleet, bringing in Jeff Green. And all these players have been very productive, very solid. To narrow our focus a little bit, we're talking about a sophomore that's on this Houston Rockets team. That's going to be Jabari Smith Jr. So for Jabari Smith, I'm not sure if you had a chance to watch him in Summer League, but that's where the improvement started. I watched him. I think it was that Trailblazers game. It was the Blazers and Rockets, the one that it was a game winner by Jabari Smith. It was very early in Summer League. I think he had 30 points that game. And from there, it was just, man, he was just proving that I don't belong here. I've made such an improvement in my game that I am far and away better than almost anybody that's going to be on the court with me here in Vegas. And that's carried over into this season. You look at the numbers, you're not going to see a huge increase in points per game. It's not like he went from 14 to 20, right? It's not like he's become an offensive focal point. That's still Van Vleet. That's still other guys on this roster apart from Jabari Smith. He's not going to dominate in terms of touches per game. If you look at his usage rate, Avi, it's actually lower this season than it was last season. Last season, it was 17%. This season, it's 16%. So that has happened because they've brought in extra offensive firepower like Dillon Brooks and Van Vleet. They command a lot of touches. They're very ball-dominant players. So for Jabari Smith, it's caused him to have to pick his spots a little bit more carefully because the shots per game are down, the usage is down. But it's had a positive impact on his efficiency. So he's kind of in a more positive light than Paolo in terms of efficiency. And part of this is because the roster construction just makes more sense around him. But to his credit, he's improved his 2-point percentage from 48 to 54, big jump. 3-point percentage went from 30 to 37, huge jump on that front as well. Free throw percentage, 78 to 82, very solid improvement. He's in the 80s. That's who we want a guy to be. That's a 6'10", 4, maybe a small ball 5. True shooting percentage. So for those of you that might not be aware, true shooting percentage is basically a combination of 2-point percentage, 3-point percentage, and free throw percentage. If you want to combine it all into one number, you get true shooting percentage. Jabari Smith is at 58%. Last season was 51%. So that 7% increase just kind of paints the picture of how he's so much more efficient this season. So that's the big story in terms of the numbers. And then if we want to get a little bit deeper in terms of the on-court product, I think a big difference in his game is the strength, just being able to hold his arm more effectively. He's not pushed around as easily. For his shots, he's not getting moved off his base. He's a solid, strong base. Going to the rim, he's more confident in being able to create space for himself, get off good shots. That really showed itself in Summer League. Like I saw that from the get-go. And he's taking more shots to the rim, less mid-rangers. I think that's another product of increased strength. You feel more comfortable going to the rim as opposed to settling and taking more mid-range jumpers. So those are a few little differences I've seen so far in this game. And I think all of those have combined to make him more efficient, a better player, although he's not dominating the ball. He's not getting a ton of shots per game for a Houston Rockets team that already has plenty of other guys that can assume their responsibilities.
Couldn't have said it better myself. When watching Jabari Smith, I think the point you made about Summer League is actually very instructive. If you compare his rookie Summer League versus his sophomore Summer League, it was night and day. As a shot creator, he just looked so much more comfortable. Physically, yeah, he looked much more like I belong here. I know what I can do. Physically, these younger kids can't keep up with me. I can get to my spots. And in fact, in Summer League, I had a very, very basic model that kind of evaluated prospects, and I was trying to determine who I thought would be some of the best players to come out of this Summer League, who I thought would be like NBA ready. And the 4 names that popped up in my model were Chet, Orlando Robinson, actually, surprisingly, Keontae George, and Jabari Smith. Those were the 4 that really popped above the rest of the crowd. And he's carried that over this year. Now, some of that is also context. Last year's Houston Rockets were maybe the ugliest watch ever. Like I'm including this year's Pistons. I'm including this year's Spurs. And I still think last year's Rockets might have been worse as a viewing experience than them. Defensively, it was all over the place, and offensively, you just felt really bad for Jabari Smith because
Mhm.
I think the role that he currently has is the one he probably could have had his rookie year as well.
Sure.
Having Van Vleet makes all the difference in the world. Finally, he has someone who can actually feed him shots closer to the hoop, someone who can get him more uh, touches in zones that he is better equipped to score in, such as more closer to the paint, near the rim. He can provide a little bit more of an alley-oop threat. Those aren't stuff that point guards of the past, let's say, with Houston allowed him to do.
Right.
So I think that's part of what makes a big difference. But the strength, you do notice it. I think overall, right now, he profiles as like a solid power forward as a starter. I don't know what his long term growth will be because I'm not sure how many on ball reps he's proven that he deserves. I don't view him and think, oh, okay, I want to give him more of the ball. I feel really confident in his ball security. And as a shooter, he's all right, but compared to the next rookie we're going to talk about, Keegan Murray, I don't feel as confident in his outside game. But I just think the circumstances, the improved defensive scheme around him, which has let him kind of pick his spots more defensively, foul a little bit less, but also just be more of a presence on the boards. I think that overall he is a more effective player this year, but it wouldn't have shocked me if he was similar last year. It's just the context around him last year was so bad, it made him look terrible.
Yeah.
One last note on the true shooting percentage thing, just to give an indication of how much of a jump that is. Last year when he was at 51%, that was 7% worse than league average. And now he's almost at 59%, which is 1% above league average. And typically, when you're looking for shot creators from your starters, you typically don't want your starters to be lagging too far behind the average. And
Right.
last year he was, and it wasn't totally his fault.
No, exactly. Exactly. I mean, context is everything.
Yeah,
Situation means a lot. And especially for young players, I think that their situations influences their game a lot more than more established players. If you go and take Luca and you drop him into any team in the league, he's going to be Luca. Like that does not it's not going to change. But a guy like Jabari Smith, guys that are still trying to find their footing in the NBA, just the system they're in, it's such an influence on them because they're not established enough to know they don't have enough experience to know, okay, this is where I need to take my shots. These are the kind of looks I should be trying to generate on a nightly basis. For Jabari, it was okay, I have a smooth mid-range game. I'm pretty slight of frame. I don't have a lot of strength. Let me try to get something going in the mid-range, which, as we know today in this analytically driven era, that's not a shot you want to lean on a ton unless you're in the top 1% of mid-range shooters, like maybe a DeMar DeRozan or someone of that mold.
Durant.
Exactly. For a guy like Durant, guys that can shoot over 50% from mid-range, which is a complete outlier. That's not the majority of people in the league. But yeah, like Jabari has just kind of realized where he needs to get his shots. And yes, like I agree. Like last year's Rockets, he was being fed post touches and high post touches by Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green. Those are two names you don't want to be relying on to be your floor general for 30, 35 minutes a game. They're just not that type of player. You bring in Van Vleet. Okay, we know that he's a very efficient three-point shooter. 39% this season on 7.8 attempts per game. High usage, like high frequency, high accuracy. Defenses have to respect that. On the other side, when he's needed to just get other players into position and give them good shots, 8.5 assists per game.
Yep.
So we're talking about definitely above average 3-point shooter. And we're talking about probably a top 7 to 8 assist man based off of assists per game this season. So playing with a player like that, man, I mean, it just does wonders for your game. So definitely want to give the Rockets system credit, the Rockets front office credit, Ime Udoka credit, because they've all really played a part in just making this team into what it is, which is a legitimate playoff contender. But on the flip side as well, we want to give Jabari Smith some props because we know that as a second-year player, we've seen second-year players struggle. They've actually gotten worse sometimes in the rookie year. And for a guy like Jabari, yes, I agree with you. I don't see a guy that's going to be a top offensive option for a championship caliber team that you just feed the ball and say like, okay, make something happen, make something out of nothing, be a hyper efficient, like high usage player. But I mean, as a guy that can be like a 17, 18, 19, maybe 20% usage player, to be an efficient 3-point shooter off of 2 dribbles or less, be a pretty decent mid-range shooter, a guy that can get to the rim at a decent clip and finish with a good free throw percentage. I think that's where he slots in as being a very, very good player. Maybe an all-star-ish type of caliber when he gets to his full form. And, we can't forget the fact that he's also a solid defensive player as well. For all this talk about offense, that was one of the big highlights coming out of college was, hey, this guy can guard multiple positions with his length, with his quickness. And I read a piece by Zach Cram at The Ringer. I've plugged his piece before when he has his Cram session Wednesdays. Guys, got to check that out. He has a whole article about the biggest stories in the league right now. One of his stories, ironically enough, was about Jabari Smith Jr., who we're talking about today. And he mentioned that Ime Udoka said that Jabari Smith is started out on 4s when the game starts, but as needed, he switches on to 3s and 5s.
Yes.
So that paints the picture of his versatility as a defender. So I like how he's versatile. I wouldn't put him in the all defensive, defensive player of the year conversation, but I mean, above average, super versatile, a true weapon on that side of the floor that you can put him on some pretty legitimate offensive options and not have to send a double team or really just stress your defense. So great two-way guy that I think is going to have a long future in this league.
And that was part of the appeal with him as a prospect. I think if there were 2 areas where I think he can still grow, and I feel actually really good about it, it's becoming more of a pull-up 3-point shooter and defensively gaining more confidence from the coaching staff and in himself to be able to guard 3 through 5. Whereas right now, more of the time, he still spends on power forwards. I think as he grows even stronger and he grows more confident, there is a possibility that the Rockets start using him even more frequently as a small ball 5 because he'll have the size, because he'll have the strength. And then as a pull-up 3-point shooter, when you watched him as a prospect, that was actually one of the main drivers of his appeal, is that his 3-point shot looked really good. And there were flashes where he's pulling up from deep and it looked really nice. His first year in the league was really rough. That's actually another reason why the Rockets coaching staff deserves a lot of credit, because this was a player who on pretty high volume for a power forward was shooting about 30 to 31% from 3. And it would be very easy for a player like that who's struggling to start losing confidence. So it helps that Jabari is a really confident player, at least so it seems. But it's also up to the coaching staff to make sure that they keep reminding him, hey, no. We don't believe in this 31% stat. We believe in your history. We think you're more of that 37, 38% type of shooter. And It's paid off in a big way. He's kept his volume up, and the 3-pointers are flying, and they're looking good. Again, if he gains even more confidence from the coaching staff, and now he gets a little bit more opportunity to actually try some pull-ups, maybe you'll generate a little bit more usage that way. Maybe you'll get a little bit more shot creation that way. You'll get more of a green light from the coaching staff to attempt more drives. So I think those are the 2 main points. I mean, he's fouling people less than he did last year in terms of shooting fouls, where last year there were times where even though he's not even the main shot blocker, there were times where there was, I don't want to say undisciplined fouls, but there was a little bit more frantic just fouling of players, which seems to have been tempered down a little bit. So all in all, I think it's a very, very positive jump from Jabari, and I think there's still a little bit more he can add.